I am going to be disassembling and restoring this Super Nintendo and this Super Famicom. 8-bit joystick. It is quite sunny and warm in Portland, Oregon, and I am going to be disassembling and RetroBriting my Super Famicom here. This is the one that I mainly use, but as you see, it has yellowed over a while as the bromine in the plastic has bonded with oxygen, and I'm going to be taking it apart and RetroBriting it. And then my friend let me borrow her Super Nintendo, which definitely needs some cleaning. And I'm going to be disassembling and taking apart this part right here, the controller connectors, that definitely needs to be RetroBriting. But it'll be a good opportunity to show the differences between a Japanese Super Famicom and American Super Nintendo. Taking a look at my other beige Nintendo systems, I have a Super Famicom Super Game Boy right here, and it's actually looking pretty good. It hasn't really yellowed, a little tiny bit, but not enough to really warrant a RetroBriting session. My old NES definitely needs RetroBriting. I wasn't able to fully get the yellow off on the previous attempt on this part, on the hood and cartridge connector, and definitely back here. This is my AV Famicom. It is looking perfect. There's no real reason to do any kind of RetroBrite treatment on this. Looks like it just came out of the box. My original beige and gray NES Zapper likewise looks really good and does not require any RetroBrite treatment at this time. And here is my friend's retro PC case, or at least the front of it, which has significantly yellowed, and I'm going to be RetroBriting it. Taking a look at my AV Famicom Dogbone controllers, they're actually looking pretty good, as are my Super Famicom controllers. A little bit of yellowing, but not really enough for me to want to take them apart and do it on this particular session. So, looking at my controllers, this one's looking pretty good, this one's looking pretty good, this one's looking pretty good, but this bad boy right here had some severe yellowing, and I specifically got this guy to take apart and RetroBrite, so I'll be doing that. First, I'm going to disassemble my NES. First, I cycled power to make sure to discharge the transformer. Good old long number 2 Phillips screwdriver. Right, now that the metal pieces are removed, I can take apart the plastic. And it comes apart just like that. So I'll be RetroBriting this NES lid, this NES top case, but these are fine. For this NES controller, I'm using my Pink Gorilla Bootleg Buddy toolkit, and looks like it uses Phillips. Oh man, look at that. So there's some crap and schmutz in there. Oh yeah, definitely need to clean and brush this one. So it's important to note and to always want to document how the cords are. So this Nintendo is really smart, and look at this. So the cord goes through here, wraps around, and so this actually protects when the cord is pulled from pulling on the fine connectors here. Oh man, these are filthy. The buttons need to be cleaned. Oh, look at that. It's sticking. Dirty membranes. Dirty buttons. And whatever is on here, look at that. It's sticking. I peeled it off. So, I definitely want to clean that with IPA. Alright, moving on to the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo. Let's take them both apart at the same time so we can compare the process. For the external portions of taking apart the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo, we are going to use a large game bit screwdriver. So this is a security bit or a game bit screwdriver. I have the various bowls to denote which it came from. This is magnetized and it makes getting them out easy peasy. So, the inside of the Super Famicom. Let's do that to the Super Nintendo. Inside of the Super Nintendo, looking a little, well, it needs cleaning. Super Famicom also needs cleaning. So now that the security bits are out, we got to use some regular Phillips screwdrivers to open this up. Start with the Super Famicom. Let's see, let's start with the power. Discharge the capacitor. Piece of hair in here. Come on, you. Why aren't you coming out? Alright, so the motherboard should be free to be removed. So I'm taking out the cartridge, and you need to note how the springs is over there. So one piece of the spring. Definitely make note of how the spring is set. Lift up. Then you can slide out the axis. And then the all-important for the spring goes like that. Oh, one more. Got this little guy in the back. Aha! So, definitely got some dust, but not terribly bad on the inside of this case. Now, on here, gently rock and slide out the ribbon connector. Using a flat screwdriver, gently press down on the old tabs to push them out evenly, careful not to break the old brittle plastic. Unlatching the plastic, and then it moves free. But the inside piece looks pretty good. Now I'm curious about which unit I have. Let's take some wiggling. I have a 1994 SNS CPU RGB 001. Now let's tear down the Super Nintendo. Look at how much of this space is left over. The Super Nintendo, they bulked up the size of it to appeal to a more macho American taste. So don't forget that there is a screw underneath the power switch. Ooh, look at those dust bunnies. So the Super Nintendo connector is a little longer and it's wrapped around here. The cord is. So you gotta wiggle it out like that. And nudge these out. All right. Don't forget the little LED clip right there. Little nubbin going over the LED light. And I was finally able to get that part out. All right, taking a look at both the motherboards. Ooh! The Super Nintendo, this is a SNS RGB002, and I have an RGB001. This is from 1995, and this is from 1994. Cleaning the top shelves. I'm not going to take that off, but I am going to clean it. That's what we'll be modifying. Flipping those off. Super Famicom shell. On the Super Famicom case, start with the back clips and then move forward as evenly as you can. All right. Make sure you have the stopper in your sink and make sure that you give everything a good scrub down with just regular dish soap to get all the dirt and schmutz off, and then give everything a good rinse before the RetroBrite process. Now is the time to really get in there with a scrubber to really make sure that you get all the dirt and schmutz off it. Especially when you're trying to get dirt that's been on there since MC Hammer had his big break. The RetroBriting gel is very caustic, so make sure that you're wearing goggles, eye protection, and using chemical-rated gloves because you don't want to burn yourself. Set the spray nozzle to wide and make sure that you cover every single surface that's exposed that you want to change. Lay it on there pretty thick because it's going to be out there for a while. Make sure to use the gloved hand to manipulate the parts that you already coated with the bleach goo. You want every single nook and cranny covered. And when you're done, zip it up tight. Place it outside in a safe area away from any interlopers and make sure that there's going to be a minimum amount of shadows falling on it. You really want to maximize the sunshine.
Hey, leave that alone.
Make sure you check on them daily, and if need be, you can top it off with a new layer of RetroBrite goo. I had these out in the sun for 5 days, which probably was a little too much. And when you're ready, bring it all inside and carefully get ready to wash off the bleach. I really want to stress that you should be using some gloves and eye protection. There still is a good amount of bleach on the surfaces. You want to carefully let it drain and scrub and get every single bit of goo off, but make sure to wear eye protection because you do not want to get any of this in your eyes. Make sure to get every single surface scrubbed clean, then give it a good rinse and let it dry on some towels overnight before reassembling. Let's put together this NES controller, and I am very, very pleased at how it turned out. That looks very bright and great. I'm going to be cleaning the connection with some industrial alcohol and then scrubbing it with a toothbrush and a 1-up card to make sure to clean any of the corrosive residue or 3 decades old cola residue. Then reinstall the D-pad and the buttons using the plastic guides, and then affix the membranes using the guide posts over the button holes, and the select buttons doesn't have any, so that's just the membrane. And then finally get the membranes for the D-pad in there. Then you are ready to put the motherboard back on the inside the controller. Make sure to try and wrap the wires the same way as they are because the metal inside the wires has a bit of a memory. Make sure to check your photo reference to make sure that you have the wires wrapped around the correct plastic guide posts before applying the second half of the controller shell. Just keep the 2 halves of the controller tight together in your hand when you test out the buttons and make sure everything feels right before installing the screws. I think it works better to tighten the screws evenly and make sure that you get most of them in there before really tightening and getting the final tightness down. But you want to make sure that it is 100% tight or it's going to feel weird in your hands. Make sure to test how the buttons feel as you go to see if anything needs to be adjusted or retightened. Not only does that controller look great, but it feels great too. Before I start reassembling the Super Famicom, this is a perfect opportunity to give the cartridge port a deep cleaning with some industrial alcohol and a toothbrush, and then a cleaning cartridge. You really want to clean the corrosive residue off the connectors, but not actually bend the pins. For reassembling the Super Famicom top shell, you sort of want to start with the bottom and work up. So I already have the LED light on, and the reset switch is in there, then the power switch, and then we're going to be putting in the eject button, placing that in there, then the little square around the power switch. Make sure to have the spring for the cartridge slot taut before you snap on the top, starting at the bottom and then working up. But make sure to snap from the bottom top to make sure everything is nice and in there. You also want to check the alignment and make sure everything feels good, and it's just fun to mess with the switches and the buttons. Then you want to take the plastic cartridge lock arm and place it over the power switch. It works best when it is in the off position. And then put the washer on there and then the screw to hold it in place. Earlier versions of the Super Nintendo shell also used the same mechanism. That is just fun. Then you want to install these little metal mounting brackets for that CD-ROM attachment for the Super Nintendo that we're gonna get any day now. Then put your motherboard in there, making sure it's nice and aligned, and get to town placing the screws. I thought I was being so smart by remembering to install the screw under the power switch first. However, what am I forgetting? Am I forgetting something? We'll see. If you know what I'm forgetting, post it down in the comments. You want to balance the power switch before you get the first screw in there. Then you want to go around and methodically just install all the other screws on the motherboard. You don't want to over tighten them, but you want to make sure that they're in there. You don't want anything rattle around, but it's not like this is going to hold any external force, so you don't want to over tighten it or strip the screws. And don't forget the long screws around the cartridge slot. Feel free to make your own tight cartridge slot joke. Then moving on to the controller connector daughter board, make sure that you get one on the left, two on the right, and the LED switch on the right before snapping it all in place. That should mount on there nicely. The back CD-ROM bracket doesn't need a screw, but the front one does to keep it from rattling around. Then you want to take the controller connector daughter board ribbon cable and get it in there, and then evenly get it in there until it is nice and mounted. But you want to push in both sides at the same time so that it is at an even angle. Might take a little bit of futzing until it's in there. Now everything is in there and it feels good. You can power it on and test the controller connectors if you want, but I'm confident. So, if you posted a comment and said that I forgot to install the RF shield before I put on the front screws, you were right, and you win a special star prize. Not really, I don't really have any special prizes to give out, but you get the satisfaction of being right on the internet, which itself is its own reward. It is get a big hit of dopamine for being right. You want to wiggle the RF shield into the cartridge connector and then screw them down to the motherboard and then attach the power switch. That's right, the blocks go into the square hole. Reinstalling the eject lever axle and the eject lever spring is a little tricky, but I'll walk you through it. The vertical pieces of the spring are in the back, while the front doesn't have any pieces. The lower part of it goes into the part of the housing, while the top part goes into the nook on the eject lever. So you want to get the lower part of the spring into the housing and then hold it up. Make sure you don't get the axle all the way in there. Tuck the top part and then align and then slip it in there. Then you want to test it out and don't feel bad about needing to try and install it multiple times. It's pretty tricky. Then you're ready to place the completed top shell and then get ready to flip it over. Then reinstall the security bits using the security bit screwdriver and then reinstall the expansion port cover and you should be good to go. I'm not gonna lie, Nintendo's legacy as a toy manufacturer comes through with manipulating the physical switches. Feels good. While I was able to get rid of the yellowing, I had it out in the sun for way too long and there's a little bit of a mottling effect the way that the plastic bag was pressed against the unit. I probably should have only had it out for about 2.5 days and not 5. Now, the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo use almost the exact same motherboard, and you can play Super Famicom cartridges on your Super Nintendo by using some clippers and removing the plastic blocks that are blocking the insertion of a Super Famicom cartridge. So this is an excellent opportunity to take a sharp clippers such as this, which is used for clipping plastic for putting together Gundam Gunpla models, and get in there and clip them on both sides, and then you should have no problem putting in a Super Famicom cartridge without needing an adapter. Clippers work, as do a Dremel, and you could also use a needle nose plier to remove the last little bits of debris on there and make sure you have a nice clean result. For reassembling the Super Nintendo shell, you want to clip the switches to the back pieces, just press them in there. So you can either put in the Super Nintendo faceplate before the power and reset buttons or after. Then you take the cartridge flap, put it in so that the spring is loaded, put your finger on the bottom to keep it from springing, and then put it together like a cartridge slot sandwich. Then hold it down and put in some screws to hold it in place. Screw, screw, screw. Screw, 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 and then you have a functioning cartridge flap. Aw, yeah. Then you want to reinstall the spring that goes to the reset button so it's slightly taut so that the reset button will snap back in place after you hit it. Look at those mechanical parts working together. That is Nintendo's legacy as an expert toy maker, making Gunpei Yokoi proud. Then you want to go around and reinstall all the screws. Screw, screw, screw. Screw, screw, screw. And now you're done. Moving on to the motherboard. I definitely want to give this a good cleaning with some 99% pure industrial alcohol. I have an alcohol-soaked toothbrush, and I'm giving the cartridge connector slot a good brushy. You can also use a cleaning cartridge, but now I want to take the opportunity to remove as much corrosion residue off the connectors while I can. So this video actually took several days and more than a week to film, actually. So as I took apart multiple systems, I used some bags which I labeled to store all of the connector bits. I had a Super Nintendo top, a Super Nintendo bottom, and a Super Famicom one because I wanted to make sure that I use the exact same parts for each system. So make sure that you label your stuff. Makes it a heck of a lot easier for putting things back together. So we got the Super Nintendo CD-ROM little clips that you put one down on there. Now that the motherboard is in place, I learned from my experience with the Super Famicom and installed the RF shield and put it in place with the two screws on either side before putting together the power switch. Screw, 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 screw. Then the two longer screw go by the cartridge slot because, again, you want a nice, clean, tight cartridge slot and make your own, maybe inappropriate jokes related to that. Then just go around and reinstall all of the screws that you can on the motherboard. And you don't want to actually over tighten them or strip the screws, but they're just to keep the motherboard nice and taut to the plastic. When you're getting ready to reinstall the front controller daughter board, don't forget to put the LED nubbin in place. before going around and snapping on the front plastic, making sure to do it evenly and get all the clips at around the same time. Then thread the ribbon connector through and flip it around, and then you're ready to reinstall it and reseat it into the case. So you want to get the connectors started and properly aligned, and I actually think it works better to pull it in instead of trying to push it in. Feel free to make your own potentially inappropriate jokes. That's what she said. Getting ready to reinstall the eject button spring. You want to make sure that the round part goes forward and that the arms are in the back. Install the lower bit into the bottom part of the plastic arm. With the axle already installed in the eject lever, hook in the bottom, then hook it onto the lever, and then you're ready to slide the axle all the way through and then test it out, and keep in mind that it takes a couple tries in order to get it right. Then put the top half together and attach using the security bits. You want it in there, but you don't want to strip the screws. And don't forget to add the Super Nintendo's CD-ROM expansion port cover, which I'm sure is coming out anytime. Much like the Super Famicom, I was able to remove all of the yellowing, but I potentially had it out in the sun for a little bit too long, and in certain light you can really sort of see the mottling on certain parts, and I'm really sorry that this happened. But overall, I would definitely do it again, but I just wouldn't do it quite so long. So 2 to 3 days is just the right amount of time, but definitely not 5 days to an entire week. However, the controller looked fantabulous. I'm very glad with how that turned out. The moment of truth, powering on my Super Famicom after working on it. Not like I was worried. Now the Super Nintendo powers on like a champ. And if you notice, it's now playing some Super Famicom cartridges without using an adapter. Now you're playing with power. Super Famicom power. About a year ago, I made some videos about Super Nintendo games that work better in Japan, and I need to get back to doing that because significantly cheaper is significantly better. I work hard to make new videos like this each week, so make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss one. You know what? This video was a heck of a lot of fun to make, and I have a complete list of 8-bit joystick video game hardware videos right here, so make sure you click on one when you're done. This is 8-bit joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.